Hey folks, this is Tiny Little Victories, and I'm your host, Jennifer Kaipal. Wow, this has been such a ride. I keep saying that every time I get on to record this show, but it is such a ride because I love how excited people are about telling their stories. Isn't it great that people get to tell their stories? I mean, everybody wants to tell their story. So I know we've been listening to a lot of great stories lately. We've heard from Alexis Nicole Smith talking about self-reclamation. We've heard from Dim about what was going on in the brand wars when mobile phones were becoming so predominant. We've talked to a comedian. We've talked to designer Laurence Carr. And today we're getting ready to talk to somebody who has had his finger on the pulse of technology for quite a long time. His name is Martin Bryant. He's a journalist, an entrepreneur. He's a business guy. He's also a musician. We're going to talk about that, how he wants to make instrumental hip hop. But more than that, he's so passionate about words and telling stories with those words for early stage startups. He's from Manchester, England, so he has a fantastic accent. And hey, all you people in London can just stick it, because I think the Northern accent is so passionate. There's so much energy and so much emotion in it. I love it. So we're going to talk to him. We're going to hear about everything he's been doing. He was editor-at-large at the Next Web about over a decade ago. He has edited so many publications. He has a new publication that he's put out there called Pre-Seed Now. Really interesting stuff we're going to talk about. He has a newsletter called Geek Out, comes out on Fridays. I mean, it's actually really great. You guys should subscribe to it. I'm going to put it all in the notes. But he's coming up next. But I just want to thank you again with all your listening and sharing. So yeah, I'm just going to ask, if you like the podcast, please share it with people. Share it on your social channels and maybe repost it on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in being on the show, definitely reach out to me, because I really love everybody's stories. They're really so interesting when you start digging into it. So stay tuned for this chat with Martin Bryant coming up next.
Powered by Riverside.
Hey, this is your host, Jennifer Kai Powell, and I'm coming at you with Tiny Little Victories. We have an amazing guest today. His name is Martin Bryant, and he's from Manchester, England. It's going to be amazing. Hey, welcome back to Tiny Little Victories. I'm your host, Jennifer Kite Powell, and I have an amazing guest with us today, Martin Bryant. Hello, Martin.
Hello. Good to be here.
It's so great. You're here from the north, up north in the United Kingdom. Can I ask you a question about that? You know, in all these sci-fi shows, they're like, it's always about the north. There's always something happening in the north. Is that, do you get that a lot when people meet you from the north, or the Icemen coming?
Well, yeah. Well, not really, but it feels a bit like that. It feels a bit like that in London, where anything north of just above London is some kind of barren world that they don't understand. And if a lot of people who move, let's say they go to university in Oxford, Cambridge, or London, something like that, and then they get a career in London, and they're from the north, they'll start to adjust their accent to be a bit more southern, a bit more southern. But I didn't realize how how incredibly northern my accent was until
I love your accent.
I listened back to a video recently that I made at university. I got a digital copy of it finally, and my accent it's changed now. It's still northern, but it was so northern.
Really?
But there's a real social thing to it, where if you're from the north, you get taken less seriously by a certain kind of person, and it's a real weird thing. Yeah,
it is a really weird thing, and I love. So you were able to seriously notice that your accent changed from uni to now, because I think you have this very beautiful, pronounced northern accent. And actually, it's interesting that you should say that, because when I was living in London, I was dating then, and most of the nicest men that I met were from the north. And then some of my friends, like in London, be like, "Oh no, you can't go out with him because he's from the north," and also his accent. And I'm like, "I'm sorry, like what's going on here?" And then I realized it's all this like micro, like aggression. And then I thought about it from America's point of view. And when someone has a really pronounced Southern accent, I think it's the same. Like they're like, "Oh, they can't be intelligent or bright." But I find those accents to be. This is not what we're supposed to talk about today, but I find those accents to be much more expressive and emotive, you know, than anything. But I was thinking, right? I mean, it's like because your inflections are there, you have passion. So I really enjoy listening because I feel like, okay, they're not so flat. They're alive. They have passion for what they're doing. and I was watching his Dark Materials recently, and it was all, again, about the North. I'm like, what is going on? Okay, so we've settled that. Anybody north of London thinks it's a barren wasteland. Okay, fine. Fine. So I want to introduce you because you have a lot of titles, and you've done a lot of things. Journalist, entrepreneur, of a big revolution. I want to talk about that. Musician, of which, by the way, you owe me a soundtrack from like 10 years ago, just so we're clear on that one.
Do I?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
Okay.
And so you've done so many things. I mean, you were the editor of the Next Web back in the day when I think the Next Web actually had great editorial. And you work with tech companies, use your journalistic background to help people like get their words straight so they can communicate. And then you've started Precede Now, which is amazing. So how is it that you are able to bring all these things together? And it's fascinating that you've put together all these things. Oh yeah, I want to tell everybody he's also done a lot of docu-podcasts. So I want to talk about that later too. That's okay.
Yeah. I suppose a common theme through it all, the common theme through it all is kind of making sense of things and putting things into clear language. So whether it's journalism, where I remember the first time I thought I've got a knack for this was one of the first times I wrote about a startup, and they told me, the way you described us, we've started using that in our deck because it's clearer than anyone else has ever put it. And that was like, hang on a second, maybe that's something that I'm good at. And so whether it's writing for the Next Web, writing, freelance, whatever, whether it's doing my own newsletter, whether it's consulting, and I've done PR at various times and things, it's always been about putting complex ideas into simple, easy to understand language, I suppose.
Yeah, I think you do. I think that is your knack. I think you have an ability to distill things into, I think a lot of these startups, you work with really early stage. I'm gonna ask you like why, but like I think a lot of times they just talk in these circles, whatever their investors or their seed investors want to tell them. It's very hard to understand what they do, and I think like that is a skill, that is a service, because it's very difficult to read something. I get a lot of pitches as a journalist as well. I'm like, what? Wait, what are you saying? I don't follow this at all. And so, like that distillation of words, did that lead you to Big Revolution? Is that sort of where that came from?
Well, I suppose the reason I went into that was I was kind of a bit burnt out from journalism, where I'd been I'd been at the Next Web for a few years, and I'd gone from reporter through to editor in chief. I was editor at large. I was like, I want to do something different, and I quite like the idea of working more directly with companies. And so the idea was, and I wasn't really sure how it would work, because I didn't really like the idea of having an agency per se, but I like the idea of working with startups, and so it's kind of freelance, but with a bit of branding alongside it, I suppose. So I helped startups with things like, I still do a bit of this from time to time as well. Now. Just everything from their homepage, putting what they do on their homepage into better language. Their deck. I mean, how can their deck actually be compelling? Taking 100 words and turning it into a sentence, that kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely.
How do you find that's changed? Like, I mean, I know you've been doing this for a while, so I know the tech scene has changed a lot. Of the speed with which we're talking about things has changed. How do you think that communication or that words and messages have changed in the past year since you've been working on it? Have you noticed a big difference?
I mean, more generally, I think and this is just not just about language, this is about startups in general. At the early stage, founders are often better prepared and better connected and know what to expect, etc., at an earlier stage than they used to be, because there's a lot more out there, a lot more books to read, a lot more podcasts to listen to.
University certificates you can take.
Yeah, exactly. So there's so much out there, but still, I think there's still a core problem, and I have this with my own things as well. Maybe not so much with Pre-Seed now, because I think I can describe that really clearly, but a lot of the other things I do, I think I sometimes find, and I think everyone who's ever had a business will find this to an extent, that you're so in the weeds with it that actually distilling it down to a sentence or two sentences is really difficult, because you see the big picture and the micro picture, the macro and micro, all at the same time meshed together in your head with a million to-do lists and things you need to do, and just explaining it simply can be difficult. And so
you're so close to it. You're so close to it. And
you need the outside look to the outside eye.
It's hard. I always say that having editing is the most important part of this job, right? Like, because how do you stand outside of yourself as an editor, as you were an editor at large, and like edit your own stuff? Like that's what I find difficult too, is really stepping back and thinking that doesn't make it. That's not a sentence. That makes no sense. And I think the power of language is something that I've noticed. I think in the things I read about you in Pre-Seed Now and other things you've done, like the power of language with what you create is sort of so succinct and so specific, where I feel like today everything is a little messy. Like the power of language today seems to be even more important, but people just seem very sloppy with it. That's how I'm looking at things.
Yeah? Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. I think we take things for granted. We take things for granted, like really SEO headlines that don't really connect to the body of a piece. I think, you probably get a lot of pitches from companies and startups. I get a lot of pitches from really big companies, and half the time I'm like, I don't even know what this is. So I think they're just like shoving stuff out the door. It's like this.
I think a lot of the time you have people who are communications professionals who might be writing press releases or announcements, etc., but then it goes through so many layers of people who think they know best, or maybe they legitimately have things that they think should be changed sometimes. Maybe there's legal reasons, maybe there's we want to prioritize this. But once you get all that soup of people having thrown all those things in there, you need somebody to stand back and go, actually no, we need to take this and this out. We need to rephrase this, etc. This is the editing, the importance of editing, isn't it? And when I've done PR, you often have the startup, which has its own idea of what it wants to say, which is sometimes very well imagined, and sometimes they're a bit naive, sometimes they're not sure what to say, etc. But then you've got investors who are very keen. They're very keen to show their value add, and so they and also they're very keen to make sure they're seen in the best possible light. So they will be wanting to signal to other investors, hey, look how good we are, look how smart I am,
look how smart I found these guys.
Exactly. But also they'll want to weigh in on all sorts of little tiny aspects that are just showing how important they are. And if you've then got three different investors weighing in for some reason on a piece, or different stakeholders and things, it can be so complicated, and it's such a delicate balancing act to get everything right. But in the end, you have to, if you're a professional working in communications, you have to at some point say, while I respect all of you, to achieve this aim, I am going to have to say that really we have to do this, and sometimes you lose those battles. Sometimes you lose those battles, and you have to grin and bear it. But being able to kind of put your foot down is quite important, and I'm very surprised.
I'm
surprised.
Too.
Yeah, I'm surprised sometimes where I talk to people. I've talked to people who are full-time seasoned PR pros, and I talk to them, and they say like. You told a client that? I would never tell a client. You told a client they were wrong. I would never do that.
Oh my God. See, but oh my God, you're making me laugh, because that is actually, I've heard that. That's so true. Because the client needs to hear the truth. I think they can make their own, like you said, they can make their own mind up. But to me, you're not doing your job as a somebody that's advising them, if you're not telling them the truth. I mean, if their ego is that delicate, they probably shouldn't be in this business. But I think that is part of the problem with comms professionals, as you probably seen and I've seen, is that they won't tell you the truth. They sort of like, well, yeah, it could work, but they don't want to hurt your feelings. But in fact, if they try to pitch it out and you get that story out there, you're like, but why didn't you just say this? This isn't what this does. They're like, well, the client really wanted, we couldn't tell them. I'm like, really? Really? You couldn't tell them? Are you sure? But I think that's part of the disbalance in these relationships. Like you talked about investors, they're very focused on the value add. I really like Pre-Seed now. I want to talk about that, and I'll put this in the notes so you guys can all go read it. But you're really focusing on super early stage startups, which I love. But why? Why did you pick that particular genre of startups to focus on?
Two things. One, I love writing about very early stage companies. I love discovering and talking to very early stage companies and kind of helping tell their story for the first time, I suppose. And also, there was a gap in the market. There was a real gap in the market. Nobody really writes that much about these companies.
And you do get a little more interesting. They're so much more interesting.
And I can understand why. If you're a journalist who is bombarded with stories from, the biggest tech companies to the smallest startups, you're going to prioritize the bigger companies because often those stories are more important in many ways, and those stories need to be told often, and your readers expect to understand, hear about them. So I can totally understand that. And also, if let's say you're talking about a £100,000 funding round versus a $200 million funding round or whatever, the bigger rounds are going to get more attention. That's the obvious thing, isn't it? So
that's the market. I think that's this business, though. I think you've been around a long time when you came to the Next Web, and I was working on the other side of it until I switched gears. But I feel like I like the startup early stage stuff too. In fact, I like the teeny tiny rounds from a story point of view because it's about exploration. I love what you said. It's about helping them tell that story for the first time, which again is what I was saying about people being careless with, language and communications, because sometimes people went bonkers over covering Lime and the whole electric scooter business. And now look where we are.
We
made an environmental disaster from this, and yet I don't really even see that many stories out there on like the repercussions of that story, because did anybody even question the investors about what's going to happen and what's going to happen to all these millions of scooters? I would have loved if someone had brought that up in the beginning. I bet you somebody did, and they were like, nope, it's not going to happen, right? So I like interesting stories, and that's why I love this early stage. But what is like your motivation in terms of the stories that you're writing for them? Do you have any stories that stand out to you most? I saw you wrote one on vertical farming, which I love. By the way, but what is it that you are drawn to most with some of these early stage, any particular markets?
So the focus of Pre-Seed now is pretty broad. It's UK focused companies, UK based companies who are B2B or deep tech, and that's really because I'm less interested in consumer. Consumer is often less interesting to investors, and even if it's not, then and investors are a big part of the audience, you see, but part of it as well. but also consumer stuff is easier. It's more self-explanatory a lot of the time, whereas it's more interesting to tell a story about a complicated new AI chip or somebody who has figured out a way of making money from universities' ESG budgets, or all these different so all these different things are just interesting stories to dive into, and it's a way of raising their profile, getting them in on the in front, getting on the map, getting them in front of people, and it's taken off really nicely, to be honest. It's still
I think it's you're onto something, because again, like you're right, they're sort of ignored in this market, and so you're really focusing on the UK. I mean, do you have a little more emphasis on companies from the north just because that's where you're from, or are you seeing that it's sort of all over the UK?
Well, I definitely want it to be all over the UK,
Yeah,
and
of
so
course.
I'd probably cover a few more companies from the north just because there's more companies in my network
Yeah.
locally,
Yeah.
and so I'm more likely to walk down the street and someone say, "Hey, you should check out this company," etc. But at the same time, I very much do, reach out to people
Yeah.
right across the country and cover everything. I certainly do cover London. London. There are plenty of people looking at London startups, but I'll happily cover London companies as much as I'll cover a Belfast company, Edinburgh, wherever. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. There's so much good early technology coming out of that area. I think also in terms of like scientific technology, I find it's just it's really interesting. So so to everyone that's listening, if you're an early stage startup, Pre-Seed Now, that's the place to go. Number one. And the other question I want to ask you, because I know you're super busy and I don't want to run out of time, but I want to talk to you about your opinions about the tech scene today. Oh my God. I think it's so crazy with, AI and all the metaverse conversations. What do you feel like is changed the most in terms of the technology that we're talking about, or, the things that we sort of obsess over the most?
There's always something to get excited about, isn't there? And there's always something that everyone seems to want to talk about. And yes, this quarter, this year, I suppose it'll be generative AI, which was obviously kicked off by ChatGPT just at the end of last year. And I think we'll see a lot more of that. And if you compare it to the last couple of big hype cycles, particularly around crypto and Web3, etc., that stuff never stuck with me at all. Yeah. I don't think I've ever covered a company that's related to Web3, blockchain, etc., crypto. In Pre-Seed Now, I think it's interesting technology, but that's about as far as it goes for now. Maybe someone will make something interesting out of it at some point, but the idea that we were just on the cusp of some revolution with that stuff, no, not really.
I agree. I feel like that's a total hype cycle.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of felt a bit sorry for people who I saw people who weren't tech people and weren't founders, but kind of work in the kind of world of tech, and I saw them go into crypto or go into some kind of blockchain startup and start working it and start saying, "Oh, I'm immersing myself in all this new knowledge and stuff." I went, I hope it works out for you, but I just feel like I wouldn't. I personally, I don't feel comfortable specializing in that area at all, and that's not to look down on it at all. I'm not looking down on anyone who is involved in that at all, because, like I say, interesting technology, and there are some of the academics I've spoken to. A few years ago, I chaired some events on blockchain and stuff, and if you talk to some of the academics around it, they were hype-free people talking about it as a really interesting technical problem, etc. That's interesting, but the difference with AI, generative AI, is you can see it changing the world right in front of us right now. Yeah. So one thing I do, aside from Pre-Seed Now, the other newsletter I work on, Geek Out, with a guy called Matt Navarro, which is social. Yeah. So it's a social media professionals newsletter that goes out every Friday, rounding up all the news. And
I love that. Geek Out. That's my favorite thing.
So we work together on that every Friday, and when we've got the newsletter pretty much finished, we have to find a featured image, that will show on if you share it on social media. Yeah. And so we'll both have a competition on like Dolly and Stable Diffusion or whatever to Midjourney to find the best image. And previously, just a few months ago, it was what awful stock image can we use, or what can we probably get away with using from a film, or what boring Instagram publicity image can we use? And now it's far more creative. It adds an extra 20 minutes to the end of the production time, but it's good.
Fun, though. I think it's fun because you do see a lot of the same. Used to be, you saw very few people with like VR headsets on. All of a sudden now, every single stock, every single image out there is like somebody staring up with a VR headset, or human augmentation. I see a lot of that lately. I've been looking. So somebody's arm, it's been human augmented, but they're like doing yoga on a beach. I mean, that's just a little bit bonkers. I love it that you got into generative AI, because it is so interesting to me about the way you said this, and it's brilliant, and you should like coin this, but it is heavily influencing everything from our lives to how we view content to is something true. Like, it is truly Orwellian to me in a way, because people are running around also putting up, their AI in themselves in the Lens app, and I actually think they're starting to believe that they actually look like that. And it's sort of this transformational mind shift in people's heads about who they are and what they read. It worries me a little. But so how do you think we ended up here in this just hyper-focused generative AI? Everywhere I turn around, it's all about this, and people are very adamant about it. Like, you can see some people just believe it's like the way forward.
I think we all need some good news. I think if you look at the economy, you look at the you look at the layoffs in tech companies, it's all kind of depressing news. And if you take a step back from the layoffs in big tech and look at, I don't know, when Meta did its layoffs, the layoffs took them back to where they were earlier in the year in terms of hiring, because they'd been hiring so much. It wasn't like, a massive cut. It was bad for the people who got cut, but a lot of these companies had hired so much during the pandemic because they thought they were going to need all these extra people for all this extra growth they were going to see, and then it didn't materialize. That really it's not that big a deal in the grand scheme of things. If you take away the personal impact on people who obviously, it's not nice at all losing your job.
Yeah.
But so people, we want good news. We want something to get excited about. And if you look at, if you were into crypto or whatever, and then you've got the FTX collapse, which is massively embarrassing for everyone in that world, and all the other collapses that have kind of gone around that.
Yeah, and everybody that really studied that and got into it and said it was everything else, they're like totally backpedaling.
Yeah, exactly. So you need something else to say this is the future. And the difference is you can actually build things with generative AI today, and you can actually create things. You can actually see how this is making an impact right now. So it is worth getting excited about. It is worth... It's one of those things where I kind of wish it was going a little bit more slowly. But because
why?
Well, you look at something like ChatGPT and how it's people in universities are getting worried about students turning in papers and things. And if it was going just a little bit more slowly, we could probably figure out whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, and how to fix it, how to change, how to adapt teaching to account for that, etc.
Yeah.
So because it's not going away.
We don't like to do that, though, do we? Like, we love to just glom on stuff right away and think about the aftermath. I love that you said that, if it was slowing down. I mean, what are you most excited about with, generative AI, and what are you most worried about?
Well, I mean, I'm not particularly. I mean, obviously, my if you go to the core of my skills, I suppose I'm a writer, and so ChatGPT should be terrifying me. But I think in the short to medium term, it's going to act. It's going to be a problem for anyone who writes kind of like SEO articles and things. And you saw there was the controversy around CNET using using AI to create articles that were basically SEO fodder. But in a way, although that probably took work away from some freelancer, which is bad in one way, but it's not good work. It's not inspiring work.
No, that's what it's not good writing. Like SEO writing is not good.
So I would rather a computer write that. It turned out that it was actually really badly done. But why not have a computer write that? If it's really basic factual stuff that can be, as long as it's fact checked, which they said it was and it turned out it wasn't, etc. But if it's just basically grunt work writing, then it's probably better that it's done by a computer, so that people who are actually writers can do other things.
I agree. I think it can elevate writing in a way. So I agree with where you're coming from, and I also mad at CNET for just like, if it's not fact checked, just say so. Like don't say it is fact checked. And like, fact checking is, well, but that's a whole nother topic. We can talk about that later. Okay, so
maybe someone was supposed to fact check it and didn't, and had told their boss they did. That was that could have been it.
That's probably more what happened, right? Is like, I totally did it, and so you're not really worried then. What? So that's what you're most excited about. Are you worried about anything? Maybe you're not worried about anything.
I mean, obviously, there's a whole thing around copyright, and there's a whole thing around creativity, and I mean, I'm not worried about human. There's this whole take on it's going to be terrible for human creativity because everything will become a big mishmash of what became before. That is culture.
Yeah,
Everyone
I was
draws
just going to
inspiration.
say that is exactly that is culture. That is exactly where we are. Every genre, musical genre, art genre, from the Renaissance to now is a mashup.
Exactly. And I first got into pop music and the music in the charts and things as those big kind of sampling hits were coming in. So when I was kind of like 9 years old, 9 years old, things like S Express were around, and Pump Up the Volume by Mars, and all the Doctor in the House by Cold Cut, and all those kind of things that were using loads of samples, and then De La Soul with 3 Feet High and Rising, and Paul's Boutique by the Beastie Boys. They were the first things I really paid attention to in music, and that was the first music but at the time we got to the point where De La Soul's 3 Feet High and Rising hasn't been available for years. It's only becoming available again in March this year, when they finally sorted out the deals, because they basically overstepped the mark massively, and there were all sorts of problems with the licensing of the samples, and it became so expensive to create music that way. But now it's become, you've got to the point now where sampling is so much a part of music.
Oh my God. I mean, you see, like a Tom Tom Club sample is like on 3 different kinds of completely different artists. Like, it's amazing that all those little Tom Tom Club lines showing up in rappers and R&B and Mariah Carey. It's all over the place.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's a culture jam up, just like this. Like, people forget that.
So I'm not so worried about that, because human creativity will. I mean, just look at the kind of music that people in their early 20s are making now, their teens and early 20s. It's a kind of music you could not make 10 years ago. And there are some people who obviously aren't listening to music who say that creativity is dead in music or whatever. Just listen to the kind of music that people are making now. There's a band I listen to called Jockstrap, and the kind of
I love that.
Not everyone's a fan of the name, but the kind of music they make the kind of music they make, it's a kind of music with a computer and with it's a mixture of kind of traditional pop and more kind of experimental elements and things. Or Superorganism, there's a band. The kind of music they make now is so intensely weird and out there, and a million ideas in one's place, that without the kind of computer processing you have now and the kind of software you have now. So I'm not at all worried about what generative AI will do in that respect in terms of creativity. There's obviously disinformation, misinformation, but at the same time, people are writing software to identify those when anomalies. Generative AI has created things, and when a face isn't a real human's face, etc. So we will find our way around these things, and in the short term, there will be lots of drama, there will be lots of court cases, there will be lots of problems around it, absolutely. But I think this is just one of those shifts in human growth and development that we'll get there.
I agree with you. I think that's a really great way to put that, because the only way you get through something is to go through all the things you just named, like court cases and watch groups that are looking out for this. And I think there's a great podcast called Tech Won't Save Us All. It's one of my favorite ones, and they always talk to people about things that like started out altruistic but then went wrong, but then because they went wrong, something better came out of it in the first place. So I think that's great. Actually, I'm just sort of fixated on your fact that you're right, people are creating new genres of music right now because of this mashup. I absolutely love that. I love that. Now, are you still making music? I did go to your Bandcamp site, because one of my favorite bands is on Bandcamp. Again, would they have been doing this years ago? They're called Up Is the Down Is the.
Okay.
Yeah. And one guy, right? And it sounds like just this huge symphony of awesomeness. So I get that. Are you sorry? You are making music or no?
Not at the moment, because I'm so busy. I've not made music for a few years now.
You're very busy. Writer, PC Now, entrepreneur, Big Revolution, doing docu-podcasts. I love it.
But I want to get back into it, because in the back of my head, I've got this mainly instrumental hip-hop album I want to make. I'm desperate to make.
Okay,
Like,
we're going on record right now, Martin, because instrumental hip hop, I'm up first in line for that. A, I want that, and B, that's like a decade since we talked about your music. So you're due. You're due to produce. You're due to share. When that comes out, we're going to put you back on the show, and I need a playlist. So just saying.
Okay.
Instrumental hip hop is the word of the month. We're there. We're using it. I'm going to tweet it. Okay, well, I thank you so much for calling us from the north, and I love everything you said. So insightful. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, welcome back to Tiny Little Victories. I don't know why I'm singing that song. Anyway, welcome back to Tiny Little Victories. I really enjoyed that conversation with Martin, and I hope that you did too. He's so interesting to me, right? Like, he has so much passion and energy for what he does. And I think you could tell that by the way he talked in the podcast. Now, I know we talked about something pretty specific, which has been like gnawing at me in the back of my head since we talked about it. But we did talk about generative AI, and Martin did give us his very salient comments about what part of that was going to be good and how can this sort of thing like delete a lot of the heavy lifting, some things that you do like writing and the basic research. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about some news headlines I've been seeing recently about it that really kind of bother me a little bit. One is this crazy, overly dramatic writing around ChatGPT and how it's the most downloaded app since the dawn of time, or in most mankind. Well, no, because we haven't had apps that long, and that's not all of mankind or since the dawn of time. And you can't even really compare the technology that is on an app that we use in our phone from even 2007 to now, because the phones weren't even capable of this type of stuff, and they're just struggling with battery. So to say that, it's the most downloaded and the most incredible thing and the fastest thing, it's not true. So please stop writing like that. Not you, Martin, you're not writing that, but other people. There also was a study by I think a learning platform. That was their pitch. And they had done a study about Google's like Chat GPT equivalent. And they were like, yeah, here is the results, and here why one is better. And I'm like, you guys, that thing just came out like a hot second ago. How are you scrambling so hard to get your face in headlines that you're going to make up this thing about a story about these results for something that is so new that how do you even know what to measure? I mean, to me, that's just reckless. It's reckless writing. It's just reckless headlining, because I do feel like we're in a hype cycle. Now, I will say this. I really think that you guys, if you want, you should follow Martin on Twitter. First of all, his Twitter handle is Martin SFP Bryant. So give him a follow. I think it's just Martin SFP. Yeah, that's it. I'll put it in the notes just in case I mess that up. But the reason why I think you should follow him is because he has so many interesting pieces of news content on his Twitter feed. And that is why I think he's an interesting person to follow. He is a writer, so he knows how to create content that is compelling. You don't have to be in startup business. You don't have to be an investor to follow what he writes. He takes a lot of time to create stories that are very interesting. Like, here's one headline from February 9th. Tomorrow wants you to take on Amazon, Microsoft, and Google by making better use of those wasteful crypto mining rigs. That's an interesting headline, an interesting story, an even better image that they have with the story. So you should go check that out. But I think the value is that he really brings stories to light that can have an impact on things. Because he works and writes and covers these early stage pre-seed startups, this technology is a little less hypey. Yeah, I'm going to say it. It's less hypey. So also, maybe you guys just give him a little nudge, see if we can get on that instrumental hip hop bandwagon a little bit faster. I'm really dying to hear that. I don't know if you guys are, but I am. So thank you again for listening. And thank you for sharing this podcast. If you're sharing it with a friend or an enemy, I'm happy either way. But I'm so glad that you came back, and I really hope you enjoyed this interview with Martin Bryant. And we will see you next week on another episode of Tiny Little Victories.